Let's talk about fees and engagement matters. Obviously, very important in the selection of an investment banker. Michael, maybe just kind of give us an overview of like work fees and or retainer fee that's involved in that's typical in M&A engagement.
So you typically have a retainer. We work on a monthly retainer. Monthly retainers can vary depending on the type of assignment and how much work is involved. The monthly retainer, if I just ballpark it, there's exceptions to it, $10,000 to $20,000 a month. Some bankers like to get paid up front, or once it's up front, then 6 months later or something like that. We like a monthly retainer. It just keeps everyone, I think, on the same page in terms of not taking your foot off the pedal at all. Then there's a transaction fee. A transaction fee is typically a percentage of the transaction cost. Transaction value. And that transaction fee can have a whole myriad of differences. It can be the old Lehman, which is, we don't use it, so I forget what it is now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% going up every $2 or $3 million. We like a certain percentage up to an agreed upon number, and then a higher percentage if we start exceeding expectations. And so we're willing to kind of take a little discount if we just simply meet expectations. If we exceed expectations, we want to have a bonus. That aligns our interests very well. And so that's another issue. And then the last issue is sometimes value isn't all cash up front, and so how you get paid on, let's say, contingent earnouts and things like that, notes, and that's another negotiating point. But those, I think, are the major components to this.
So, Mike, I was just going to add to Michael's comment, the contingent payments, that comes up all the time too, and the clients often want to pay us when they get paid. And we want to what we do is take a present value of those expected cash flows. And what I've said is, look, if I bring multiple deals, and I've had this happen, where we've brought multiple deals, one is all or substantially all cash at close, and then another deal has a higher deal value, but it has a lot of structure. There's stock and earnouts and notes and all this kind of stuff. And if the client chooses a higher deal value that has a lot of structure and that doesn't work out well, why should I pay the price for having delivered multiple offers and the client just picked the bad offer? And this has happened where I and the attorney have said, don't take this, take the all cash deal. And so we use that. So what we'll say is, look, if we bring you multiple offers and you choose one with structure and we get paid, if this is the only offer we can come up with, then we'll ride along with you and get paid as you get paid.
Simon, thoughts on that structure, and also just thoughts on, maybe a simple percentage versus that scale percentage, and aligning, the objective of the business owner to maximize value and the investment banker trying to, solicit offers.
Yeah, I think to Michael's point first, in terms of the ratchet, I think it was inherent in what you said, Michael, but the higher ratchet fee is only on the incremental element of the consideration.
Correct. Right.
And I think that's a great way. Someone negotiated, a private equity house told me the other day, no, this is your fee. This is what we agree with Rothschilds. It's a flat percentage. We know that you're professional enough to drive the best deal. You don't need that incentivization and motivation. And to be fair, they're right. We're out there, we're going to get the best deal. We're going to work our damnedest, even if it's a small business. We're going to look to drive value because we're professional and we're committed and driven to do that. We do like the ratchet because it gives us, it does reward us for delivering more than just a standard job or a standard offer. But these days it is a competitive environment, and when we're pitching against 6 or 7 investment banks, we are in some occasions doing a flat fee against a consideration. That's a flat percentage against a consideration, not a flat fee. But it's all about understanding what the shareholder wants, what the vendor wants, and listening to where what they're wanting to achieve, and making sure we align ourselves in that way. If they categorically say to you that they want you to be incentivized, you can't put a flat fee to them. You've got to deliver them what they want, and vice versa. So it's about listening and trying to get something that works for both sides, and that's certainly what we do.
Bill, what would you say to a business owner that gets a fee proposal from an investment bank, and there are no work fees or retainer fees, or just the selecting kind of the lowest fee proposal? What would you say to that?
Well, if they think the investment banker is the best one to do the job, again, put the fees aside, and they've made that determination, then that's how they should go. But it should not be because of the fees. It should be because they feel very confident that this investment banking team is going to be able to create the best value. One of the things that we see is sometimes we'll get this from the sellers, the business owner. I'm not going to pay any monthlies. I'll just pay you a bigger fee at the close. And that is a road to ruin, because I don't like to work for free. They don't work for free. And frankly, if a business owner is not paying some sort of monthly fee, they don't have skin in the game. And if I call, or one of my guys calls and asks for an audit or a contract, or we need some clarification on this so we can get the materials done, can you approve the buyer's list? Let's talk about it. Let's make the adjustments. If they're not paying anything, they are valuing our work as nothing, and they're going to respond in kind. And so I want to make sure that we're investing time and money, whatever we charge on a monthly, and we're in the same range that Michael, where you talked about. I think that's kind of industry standard. That still costs us money with the amount of resources and people that we put into it. So we want to see some sort of shared risk, because we want to get a closing, because we don't make money, frankly, until we get that closing fee.
John,
I think it's we sometimes call the retainers a commitment fee, and we don't tend to have them ongoing. We have it at a fixed value, and that may be £40,000 paid over 4 months, but it's a commitment fee. And what we don't charge is we don't charge an abort fee. So if the deal doesn't happen, then we don't get a fee, because that's us. That's if we haven't delivered what we've told the entrepreneur what we could deliver. If we deliver a deal that's 50% of the value that we set out at the outset, then we're not going to take a fee off him. So that's where he gets his alignment. We're driven to get the right deal for him and to get success, but we do want some commitment up front.
John, what I would kind of read it between the lines here, if an investment banker is willing to do it with a quality investment banker is willing to do it with a retainer, what they may be signaling is, you know what, I've got one shot at this. I have one buyer. I'm not going to provide you with anywhere close to the services that one of us three would provide. And it's going to be a quick in and out. And so if that's what you want to do, fine, but it's a totally different service. And so that would be kind of, I'll just say, it's not a red flag, yellow flag, but it's just, someone has to understand why were they willing to do that. And the other thing that I would say is possibly that investment bank is not busy at all, has nothing to do, and maybe that's a red flag as well. So those are just 2 points that I think are important.
Yeah.
Great points. Simon, you talked about an abort fee. I think here in North America, we call it a break fee. How common are those, Bill, in engagement letters? And the other question is, when is that break fee actually, become payable? Is it, bringing an LOI to the table? Is it bringing a bona fide offer to the table? Like when should that be determined?
We've seen that, at least heard about it. We've not put that in our contracts. We've debated that, discussed that internally. I always reserve the right to change my mind as we learn more, but I haven't seen that. I think that if we have a suitable monthly retainer coming in, I think that's the commitment. And that's a sign if the business owner is going to be spending tens of thousands, $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 over a process, that's usually a pretty decent commitment on their part. The break fee, in fact, we have a client now, we're buying a company, and they wanted to put in a break fee in the millions of dollars. It's a sizable transaction. And we advised against that as well, because we're bidding against other potential buyers. So that's just me. I know that they go on. I'm not a fan of them in our work. Again, I might change my mind at some point, but we have not worked on that basis either with our contract or when we're working with the client. Put that in an LOI or a term sheet or a purchase agreement that we might be working on.
Another matter that I see sometimes that becomes problematic are tail periods. So where you go out to a list of prospective buyers, and then those prospective buyers are put on a list that, over a period of 1 year or 2 years, if a deal is consummated after, without the involvement of the investment banker, they still get paid. Michael, what's your kind of thoughts on tail periods and kind of how typical are they seen in engagement letters?
I think typical tail periods, we asked for 2 years. There's a reason for that. The 2 year, we're putting a huge amount of time and effort into it. But I would say that's a time frame. Have we ever gone less than that? Yes. I think what's critically important for the client is make sure that you know what names are being on and when they go on. So it's not just the investment banker thinking of 1,000 people. You now have a transaction that went bust, and all of a sudden you've got a tail for 1,000 people that you didn't even know existed. So that should be very, very clear. The investment banker should have had some relationship with that buyer. It could have been a phone call. It could have been a teaser being sent. There's a whole bunch of trigger points that when that buyer ends up on that list that they're covered for. So that would be probably the most important. It's very frustrating when we're following somebody and and we look at, well, let me see who the list is. And all of a sudden the list is like a who's who in America. And it's like that was, that's very, very problematic. We won't take on that assignment. It's too problematic.
It does create a lot of problems in a very extensive prospective buyer list, and there's a long tail period. It really restricts somebody from being able to sell their business after a failed transaction.
Yeah, and we've never had an issue. If you and the investment banker blow up, okay, that's one thing. If it just didn't work out and you would work with the investment banker, you feel very differently about the tail period. Sometimes. Rare, but I don't want to give anyone too many inside say leg up on negotiating with us. But sometimes if they feel so strongly about it, we say, listen, you'll know how we deal with in 30 days. Okay, the tail period won't kick in for 30 days, and so we're giving them kind of just comfort that we have confidence in ourselves, and so now they feel a little more comfortable signing that 2-year commitment.
Any other engagement letter matters that a business owner really needs to think about? Simon, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think they're the key ones. Certainly in the UK, our tail gunner periods are about 12 months. We have sued before on that, where a client was approached midway through the process, didn't tell us the truth, but backed out of the process. And then we saw that they completed the deal. So we have sued successfully on that basis. You got to, because we put all that work up front. To an earlier point within the engagement letters, we would generally get our fee. Our fees tend to follow the money, so we don't look to get net present value of the earnout. We will follow the money and get paid when the earnout is paid. We'll get our additional fee, but our fees will always tend to be subject to a minimum fee. So we tend not to say it's 2% up to 20 million. We would tend to say it's 400,000 up to 20 million. If we could get 2%, a lot of the deals in the UK we wouldn't, but we would put a hard amount because that's our minimum fee. That's what we want to get. So if a deal came in at 15 million with a 10 million earnout, we would still get that minimum fee, and then the earnout would follow as and when the aggregate consideration reached that level. But I think they're the main points around engagement letters. We like to be, the other one would be a break fee, but we tend to want to know that if we've built a relationship with the client and for whatever reason the business doesn't sell, we're confident that that client will come back to us to sell the business again in the future. We back ourselves to build that relationship such that we keep in touch with the client after that and sell again. So they're the key areas. Indemnity liability cover would tend to come into it, but as we say, even if we're handling 100 mil sale, we cap our liability at $1 million, because if anything went wrong, it's our business. We've got that on the line. But to be honest, it's more the due diligence providers that are at risk in a transaction than the advisors. We are advisors, we can point out, but the business owner has to make that final decision on which way they go.
Bill, any final comments?
On the purchase agreement or anything else? Sure. I mean, the great comments from everybody else. Some smaller points, the expenses, what that is, that's typically a smaller issue that comes up, that we can spend a certain amount of money on airfare and hotels and travel and so forth if we are going out of town. If it's close to town, the client is close to us, obviously that's not going to be as big of an issue. Smaller issue, but it does come up from time to time.
Great. Well, thanks, gentlemen. It's been a real incredible discussion on selecting an M&A advisor.